let us go out to the Toyota of Hollywood guest line. Shop hundreds of Toyotas indoors and one of America's largest showrooms at Toyota of Hollywood on 441 between Hollywood and Sheridan. We will talk to our guy from Locked On Heat, Wes Goldberg, joining us there on the guest line. Talk a little Dame with our guy, Wes. What's going on, man? How are you?
I feel hungover.
Yeah.
Well, this guy here, he's on some other stuff because we had to talk him off the cliff.
I saw that.
Listen, man. What the hell? Like, what is it? This finally, we got a conclusion yesterday. Honestly, don't know if it can get to be a worse conclusion for Miami because he goes to Milwaukee, maybe Boston, I guess. But I guess what were your initial reactions when the Dame trade goes down?
I think the same as everybody else. Shocked. I mean, Milwaukee, now that it's done, it makes a ton of sense. But given how desperate they were with Giannis and that entire situation, but they were not a team that we were really talking about seriously, right? It was Toronto. Boston was sort of in there, even though I never really bought them as a real destination for Dame. Like every time you heard any reports or you talked to anybody, it was just everybody kept pointing back to Miami as being the only team that was that motivated to put a substantial offer together. And then when that Woj bomb comes down on the Twitter timeline and it's Damian Lillard traded and you're like, okay, cool. And then it says to Milwaukee and your initial reaction is like, wait, how, what's going on? And then you see what they got, what Milwaukee had to give up. And you're just like, seriously, this is crazy. Nothing.
Does it have the makings of it got to the point where the ego got in the way and he said, I don't care how many first round picks, I'm not doing business with the Heat?
Look,
that's the only way I can explain that.
Nobody really knows what Miami offered, right? And I think that there's been a lot of stuff out there, even this morning, the Athletic reporting that they were willing to offer up to 3 first-round picks and Tyler Herro and Jovic and maybe all this other stuff. Willing to offer and having actually offered it are two very different things, right? We know, but if anybody tells you they know what the Heat offered for Portland, I just don't buy it. I don't think anybody really truly knows because those conversations happened in July and I guess reportedly have not happened since then. You have to believe that we can call it spite, we can call it emotion, we can call it whatever, stubbornness, whatever you want to call it on Portland's side, not to deal Damian Lillard to Miami was definitely a factor. I don't know what percentage of a factor it was, but I don't think it's deniable that certainly was a factor in all of this.
How much do you think that the Heat do hold responsibility in whatever it takes to smooth things over? Because, look, I mean, there was bad feelings when Kevin Durant asked out last year in Brooklyn. Eventually, it took maybe more months, but they went from asking for Devin Booker for Kevin Durant to eventually, hey, they got a deal done. Things got smooth over. Even when the Heat signed LeBron, they were able, and foisted him from Cleveland. They went back to the table with Cleveland and made a sign and trade out of it. So this whole the Heat could never get Portland to engage. I'm just having a hard time wrapping my mind around that because you had this thing seemingly gift wrapped to you. How do you not do everything in your power to make it happen? And you're just throwing it up to couldn't get a response.
Yeah, it seems a little weird. Like, hey, they just wouldn't pick up. And that's the reason why we couldn't get Damian Lillard in Miami, right? Like that doesn't seem plausible. I just think that Portland didn't want what Miami had, and I don't think any amount of phone calls was going to change that. And again, that could just be because they don't value Tyler Herro or the draft picks that would be potentially coming over from Miami or the young guys that could be part of that deal or Caleb Martin or whatever you want to add into this trade. The Heat didn't need to make that offer. If Portland was interested in anything that Miami had, like really interested, they have the trade machine just like everybody else. They know what Miami's roster looks like. They know how many draft picks that they could trade. They know what all of that is. So if they were really motivated to get anything that Miami could offer, maybe those negotiations would have happened. And look, there was reporting in the days ahead of the Dame deal from Brian Windhorst, from Barry Jackson, like Miami wasn't quote unquote desperate to make this trade. I don't know. Now we're just sort of throwing adjectives around, but obviously they had a price in mind. They made an offer in July, whatever that might have been. And Portland just said, you know what, we don't really want any of this stuff, whether it's because we don't value them very highly or just because we feel like we can get at least comparable stuff elsewhere and not have to cave into Dame's demands or into the big, bad, big market Miami Heat.
See, that's what I think the biggest issue was, is that ego got in the way, right? And anytime ego and feelings get in the way of a deal, this is what it looks like. It almost seems like he made his original offer so ridiculous that Miami said kick rocks and they never talked again, right? There was no negotiation. There was no, well, do this or do that, right? On either side.
Well,
Yeah.
go ahead, Wes.
No, I mean, like, look, there's that report that they originally asked for Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, and that kind of got people in a tizzy. But like, that's kind of your job, I guess. If you're Joe Cronin, you're like, all right, let's just start with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, and then go down from there. If that wasn't really indeed the initial offer, but look, ego definitely played a factor in this. And look, Miami's not like they're to blame here. Like, obviously, look, Pat Riley has a history of not paying market price for superstars. It worked in Jimmy Butler. Like, we forget, like, they got Jimmy Butler, they got the whale in Jimmy Butler, but they, like, no offense to Josh Richardson, who's obviously back in Miami, but it was Josh Richardson. Like, Hassan Whiteside goes to Portland and a couple picks. Like, you didn't pay market value for Jimmy Butler, even though he was a distressed asset back then. People still viewed that as a steal a little bit.
It worked. They didn't get him for market value, but first it happened with a failed negotiation with the Timberwolves.
Right. So even then it took them 2 tries, right? And so look, they did this with, like, they signed LeBron James. The only reason they had to lose draft picks is because they negotiated a sign and trade with Cleveland, but they didn't need to negotiate with the Cavaliers in terms of real value for LeBron James. They signed Chris Bosh as a free agent. They missed out on Donovan Mitchell because they didn't want to pay up what Cleveland played up. They missed out on Kevin Durant because they weren't willing to do what Phoenix did to get Kevin Durant. And by the way, we could argue each of those individual cases and say whether or not the Heat were right or wrong, but that we've done all that already here in this market. So but when it comes down to it, Pat Riley doesn't want to pay market value. He's trying to swindle other teams. He's trying to big brother these other front offices into getting what he wants, or maybe even bully them, or try to not bluff, or whatever it is, whatever terminology you want to use. And the last 4 tries, maybe even more, it hasn't worked. And so I do think that you could agree or disagree with Pat Riley's stance there, but he's like, the Heat are certainly to blame in not getting Damian Lillard. That's definitely part of this.
And there's so much mud because you got 3 months of this stuff that we've had to go through with rumors. You know, you're following it just like I am every step of the way, but it's like, well, which one is it? Were you guys not desperate for it, or you could have definitely given a way better package for Damian Lillard? And then, like, well, what is your responsibility to make that happen? Because your superstars are doing the work. Bam's clearly he's talking to Lillard every day. You know, Jimmy Butler's got his hat in the ring. He's cool with it. And now you're along this road where it's like, hey, we're coming up on Monday, and where does Tyler Herro's feelings lie at? He's liking, trade reports and things like that. So, all right, if you want to if we're going to make a blame buy out of it, okay, I'll give the most to Joe Cronin, but you don't get nothing out of it. It's like, you don't get no blame for not getting Damian Lillard.
I would give the most to Damian Lillard and Aaron Goodwin, right? Like, I think the moment they decided that they were going to name one preferred destination was, in retrospect, the moment that the Heat didn't get Damian Lillard, because it created such a tension. And by the way, I think there was a lot of small market versus big market stuff at play here. I think Joe Cronin, as a new general manager over a small market team in Portland, was under quite a bit of pressure to not cave because of where we are in terms of the era of player empowerment, because the team that Damian Lillard wanted to go to was Miami, and because he named that one team specifically, and because of how loud his agent Aaron Goodwin was in the media space. Aaron Goodwin he overplayed his hand, and that created tensions. And look, Joe Cronin was in a position where it was either given and take the deal from Miami, which I don't think was a bad deal, but whatever, that's beyond us now. Take that, but also, but in doing so, admitting defeat, or take a worse deal from elsewhere, but be able to say, I didn't cave. And ultimately that's what he did.
Here's the problem, Wes, is that nobody else in this deal can complain other than the Miami Heat.
Right.
Dame can't complain. He went to a contender. And if you remember his comments they were, I want to go to Miami, but it was more about contending for a championship. So even if he doesn't want to be in Milwaukee, he's going to look like the bad guy if he says Cronin didn't give me what I wanted. Because then Cronin can say, you know what? You're on a championship quality team with a star player. The only people that can actually have a problem with any of this is the Miami Heat. Dame can't. Cronin can't. Cronin can go back to Portland and his bosses and say, we got DeAndre Ayton. I told you this is what we needed, a young player. However, my only problem with Cronin is that in his position rebuilding, draft picks are more important than anything. You didn't really get any. right? You got a couple, and there's a couple of swaps, but that's it. And so from that standpoint, if you're rebuilding, and now you got to move Drew Holiday, who just went for 3 first-round picks. I hope he doesn't think he's getting that.
Who knows? I mean, we're not going to be able to judge Portland's return on this until they do trade Drew Holiday. Right? But I mean, it might. I've heard stuff like 2 unprotected first-round picks. I love Drew Holiday, man. Like, he is one of my favorite players in the league. I love that guy. But 2 unprotected picks. He's 33 years old, and you're going to have to pay him something. You're going to have to renegotiate a contract with him. Either in 2 years, because he's got the player option for $36 million next year, or he might opt out and try to get a long-term deal for his last contract because he's 33 years old. Yeah. So, like, that's a lot of stuff. I don't know that a contending team is going to be giving up 2 unprotected picks. As good as Drew Holiday was an all-NBA player last year, as good as he is, it's, we're just talking about value right now. Leroy, I'm with you. Like, you could tell me, like, every time I tweeted this, like, Milwaukee got Damian Lillard for Drew Holiday, Grayson Allen, and a first-round pick. And everybody's like, well, don't forget about the swaps. I'm going to forget about the swaps. Let me just forget about the swaps. Swaps are nothing. You know what swaps are? They're swaps. They're not, you lose a first-round pick or you get a first-round pick, you still have the same first-round pick. Maybe it's just a little bit different, and there's been studies that the swaps actually don't amount to much more value historically in the NBA.
Especially so when 2 teams trying to make themselves better.
It's just a cool thing to put on a press release.
Correct.
Swap.
That's why that's why that exists.
Milwaukee anyway, if they become title contenders, you're not going to swap with them. You're going to be worse than them. So why
you could say on its face, Miami, if they were willing to just shell out without the protections of the OKC thing and all that stuff, they could have just traded 2 unprotected picks, 2028 and 2030. I would rather have those picks than the 1 unprotected pick than that Milwaukee is giving up. 2 is more than 1, right?
Based on what they say they're trying to do.
Yeah.
If they're saying they're trying to go lower than those 2 unprotected picks. But the problem is all the teams that you're doing deals with are going to have terrible first-round picks.
Right.
So how great how good is that going to be anyway?
I think Portland lost this trade. I think they were going to lose this trade if they did it with Miami anyway. When you're trading Damian Lillard, I guess just on its face, you're going to lose the deal. But I don't look at this and I'm like, this is a great haul for Portland in exchange for Damian Lillard. But by the way, I know that they got DeAndre Ayton and he's as polarizing a player as any in the NBA. The DeAndre Ayton part was going to be there if they dealt with Miami. Like that was a done deal. Nurkic to Phoenix, DeAndre Ayton to Portland, and then whatever other parts. If it wasn't Grayson Allen, maybe it would have been Caleb Martin, right? Like that part was already done. That was happening.
He definitely listen. Cronin took the screws in a petty trade to Miami. There's no doubt about that.
He went Tobin on the situation.
He did. There's a part of me that respects it. There is his petty is respectable. I want to get back to the Tyler Herro thing.
Yeah.
What do you think he's the way he handles, I guess, all of this? He's been very tongue-in-cheek, coy on social media with all of this. He is the all-time champion of beating trade rumors. But the reason they keep going to the well on these trade rumors is because of him, because they need to know if he can succeed in the playoffs. So what do you think is the way he handles this? Do you think he handles it okay? And can he just take this in his own hands and quiet all this stuff this year and finally, show that he is the third piece?
I mean, to your point, he's done this before, right? I mean, the difference, I guess, is last year, Miami said sorry with a big contract extension. Now I guess that contract extension kicks in, so he's happy making the $20+ million this year. But I don't know. It's going to be so interesting to watch. I really would love to get some clarity on what it is that Tyler Herro is to this team, and I would love for him to start. I would love for him to start at quote unquote point guard, whatever that might be in this offense, and just let him and Bam Adebayo develop, because I don't know that if another star trade doesn't happen, if they're not making a deal for Drew Holiday or James Harden or whatever, or Donovan Mitchell a few months from now or whatever it is, Tyler Herro's your dude. And he's got good chemistry with Bam. And we saw that towards the end of the last regular season, particularly. And so I just would like for them to at least explore that a little bit more. Tyler Herro, apparently we value him much more in Miami than anybody else in the NBA. The market has spoken over the last 2 years. Okay. Well, then show it, man. Like last year's playoff injury was really unlucky for him, right? It was a freak broken hand injury that he got diving for a loose ball. Who knows what this looks like had he stayed healthy and Miami still make that run? Nobody knows. It's all hypothetical. But he's not really in a position to do anything, right? Like he's not Damian Lillard. He's not Harden. He's not Giannis. Like he can't go out there and say, I'm
Look.
unhappy. Trade me. Like he's just sort of like this
Nobody,
is it.
and they would turn around and say, "Nobody wants you, dude. We've been
Like,
trying."
the only thing that honestly the best thing. Look, if his
It's
big
true.
if his big goal this year, if it honestly could work out best for everybody, if his big goal this year is I'm going to average 26, like and he's gonna average up his value of 6 points a game. Yeah, that's the best thing he could probably go do. Like is finally just put an end to all that. And yeah, it's unfortunate what happened. I don't subscribe to the Heat went on a run because Tyler Herro got hurt last year. I just think that's a completely unlucky thing. But it is still a looming question. We don't know what he can be in the playoffs. We don't know if he could be phased out or if he's unplayable because of his defense, and all those things need to be answered with him. So it's going to be an interesting thing. And man, we got to wrap up here, Wes. So I appreciate you always making time
Thanks,
for us,
Wes.
buddy. And we'll see you next week.
Good talking.
All right, there you go, Wes Goldberg. Go check out his work, Locked On Heat. Him and Dave Vermeil do a fantastic show. They cover the Heat like nobody else. The ins, the outs, the fun stuff. You guys will dig that on YouTube and all podcast platforms. You get it on the Odyssey app there as well. And we'll take a quick break. Be back with your headlines right after this.